Are you ready to learn Infinity? Let's get started with some of the basic ideas. Welcome to the Infinity Institute from the Dice Gods. My name is Hydra, and in this series we're going to get you going on Infinity in 5 with some of the basics and some simple intro missions. In this video we are looking at some of the core ideas behind Infinity, and we'll also examine a profile for a trooper in detail as well. Why? Because Infinity is a bit weird by comparison to other systems, and it's worth taking a minute to get some of the core ideas between your ears. When we've got them there, it's going to make understanding the system and getting up to speed that much easier. As ever, before we get going, thanks to our channel members and Patreons who make this possible for all you lovely people to watch. Greatest thanks to our top tier members, Old Man Rogers, Rink Wolf and Chaos Discordia. Let's start with a bit of language. Miniatures inside of Infinity are called troopers. So we're going to be using that so you're familiar with the right terms when you eventually move to the rulebook. A trooper is usually a single miniature, but there are some which are controllers and then they have several things they control under them. A good example of this would be the Nomad Puppet Tactica, Antipode Assault Pack from Ariadne, or the Arjuna unit from LF. Let's focus on the Arjuna for a second. The unit consists of an Arjuna trooper who controls up to 2 Kirin bots. Whilst that is 3 models, it is effectively a single trooper. If the Arjuna trooper dies, then the Kirin bots stop working as well. Why does that matter? Well, the first thing we need to talk about is resource management, as it's a core idea behind Infinity. There are several types of resources, but the first and most important one is orders. An order lets you do stuff. During your turn, called the active phase, you will spend your orders to make your troopers do things. When you've spent all of your orders, your turn is over. But where do these mystical, magical orders come from, I hear you cry? Well, they come from your troopers. Each trooper will generate at least 1 order. Now, there are several different flavours of order, but to explain what they do, we are only going to look at regular orders. They're the most common and most useful, but I am simplifying what's going on here. Infinity is a game of concepts which additional rules then add exceptions and modifiers to. It's easiest if we start with the common examples and build the exceptions on top of that later, so you can get your head around the normal way things work so the exceptions make more sense. I'll be doing that throughout these videos, so if you have read some rules or seen some battle reports and spot something that's a little bit janky or not always true, then know that is by design. Trying to learn and apply too many rules at once is the most common way that people fail or bounce off getting into Infinity. At the start of your active phase, you will count up how many orders you get by looking at the number of non-dead, non-unconscious miniatures which remain in your army. For our friend, the Arjuna unit, this trooper will generate 1 regular order per turn, assuming he's not unconscious or dead. This count will create your order pool. You may spend your order pool as you see fit across your army, meaning that it is possible to spend more than 1 order on a single trooper. That's right, unlike most games where a miniature can do 1 activation per turn, not so Infinity. You want to pour all of your orders into 1 big stompy robot and go ham on anything unfriendly? Totally an option. Now here we have some LF units, including the Mighty Murut tag. If all 7 of these miniatures were not dead or unconscious at the start of your turn, you would generate 7 regular orders. These can then be spent as you want. 1 on each mini? Fine. All on 1 mini, like the Murut? Absolutely fine too. Those paying attention will have put together that this means that, as the game goes on and your troopers die, you will have less orders and so less stuff you can do. You're right, that's one of the key things inside of Infinity. That makes managing your order resource and trying to keep your troopers alive completely connected. But when it comes to keeping your troopers alive, you will fail. Infinity is incredibly violent and killy. Even the biggest, baddest baddie dies. It is especially common if you've just finished painting it and it's a very big miniature. It's most likely to die. Now that we know that orders are really important and central to success and where they come from, what can you actually do with them? Well, each order lets you do 2 small things or 1 big thing in the basic game with 1 trooper. And the things that you can do, those are called skills. If you opt to do 2 small or short skills, as they're called, which you most commonly will, they must be a basic movement skill first and then something else. So a trooper can move and shoot, move and close combat, move and hack. There are currently 3 different basic movement skills and then 23 other short skills. Don't worry, 23 is a big number, we'll get you there. A lot of them are connected and based on similar ideas. It's absolutely fine. If you didn't want to do 2 short skills, you can do a single long skill. These include moving cautiously between cover, climbing, jumping, and even bringing in parachuting troopers. There are, at present, 15 long skills in Infinity. So, for those keeping score, we're up to 41 different skills in your active phase. This is why Infinity can feel complicated and overwhelming, but it really isn't. Most of these skills are very situational, and you can learn the core of the game with only 5 of them, which is what we're going to do. The rest will come. We start with 5. Next, we need to talk about the ARO, or Automatic Reaction Order. When your opponent is having their active phase and spending their orders, you will be having your reactive phase. As that implies, in your reactive phase, you may react to what your opponent is doing. So how does that work? Well, when an opponent spends an order either within line of sight or within 8 inches of one of your troopers in their active phase, then your trooper automatically receives an automatic reaction order, an ARO. That occurs in response to the order expenditure on their trooper. That last bit's important. You can only react to a trooper who is having an order spent on it, so you can't see one trooper moving and then decide to use the ARO that is generated to shoot somebody else who's just stood in the corner doing nothing. You have to react to the person that's doing a thing. Think of it like this. If an enemy pops around a corner in front of one of your guys, it takes a special kind of stupid to stand there and get shot in the face. You would hope your trooper would have the good sense to shoot back or get the hell out of the way. And with an ARO, they can. Now, AROs are nowhere near as potent or flexible as spending regular orders to do skills on the active phase. In fact, there are only 16 possible ARO skills. They include dodge, shoot, close combat, and some hacking abilities. So you will have plenty of choice, but not as many as you will during your active phase. The great thing here is that AROs aren't as limited as active phase orders. You generate an ARO for every trooper who sees or is close to an enemy trooper who activated with an order, every time they activate with an order. So if 4 of your troopers see one enemy who gets activated with an order, they may all ARO at the same time. If the enemy survives all of that violence and they activate again, yep, all 4 of your guys get another ARO. This will lead to situations where an active trooper shoots at a reactive trooper who shoots back. In that instance, where both are rolling dice, it's possible for the shots to be cancelled by either side. In fact, it's possible for the active player to have all of their shots be cancelled and take a hit in the face from the reactive player. We'll cover that more in the next video, but this mechanic, called a face-to-face roll, means that every action you take always comes with an element of risk. It's your job to ensure that you give your trooper the best chance of success and the enemy the best chance. Before we move to the profile, let's actually talk a little bit about list writing. As in most wargames, you'll play a game based on a points value. In Infinity, this is usually 300 points. Every trooper has a points value based on how good they are, what they can do, and the equipment and weapons they have. The better the trooper, the higher the cost. In addition to this points cost, you also have a support weapons cost, or SWC. You receive 1 SWC for every 50 points of game. So 200 points gets you 4 SWC and 300 points gets you 6 SWC. SWC is used to pay for the biggest guns, the awesomest skills, and the tastiest gear. Again, SWC is a combination of troop quality, equipment, and weaponry. This means that a light infantry with a light machine gun called a Spitfire may be as little as 0.5 SWC. But if you stick that same weapon on a heavy infantry with some active camo, multiple wounds and better stats, that cost jumps from 0.5 to 1.5 SWC. Sport weapons cost is there to ensure that people don't just spam big guns and the nastiest abilities. It keeps, to an extent, the game a little bit more sane. Points costs are there to balance an army against other armies and to provide flavour. So you may find similar troopers between factions are different points costs. This tells you something about those factions, their lore and the ideas of how to play them. It's why taking a unit in isolation and evaluating its performance is unwise. Consider it within the scope of the army and the faction it sits within. It's also why you won't see the Dice Gods coming out with the list of the best units in the game. Unless, of course, we caveat to it being like our opinion man. There are just simply too many variables, in our opinion, to definitively say that this is the best unit in Infinity. Something may be relatively cheap, but that may be offset by a lack of availability of other things inside of that army. Or something may seem expensive, but that's because that army is not supposed to run that way, it's supposed to run with a different type of trooper. There's a lot of things that go into the equation of points values for Infinity, and splitting it down to best and worst of lists can be somewhat deceptive, and as a new player, following that kind of guidance can lead you to a position where you feel you have the best list that gets taken apart by an even reasonably experienced player really, really easily. So we'll cover list writing and how that works later. In fact, there's kind of several videos in this series on that, but for your first games, we will suggest the list you should run and tell you why. Our channel members and patrons will be able to download copies of the list and game resources with the videos which they relate to as well. Now, let's take a look at a trooper profile. This is a profile for a machinist. That's an engineer from Pan-Oceania. In the top part of the profile are the stats of the trooper. Then we get his equipment, then special skills, then the various loadouts you can take the machinist with, points and SWC. Basically, his different weapons and abilities. Let's start with the stats. The mod stat on the left is movement. When you activate your trooper with an order, you, as we have discussed, may do 2 short skills. If you do 2 movement skills, the first skill lets you move the left value in inches, the second skill lets you move the right hand value. So a machinist moves up to 8 inches in a single order, 4 inches with the first short movement skill and 4 with the second. No matter what, you always use the left-hand skill first, so you will find some profiles have a higher value on the left, like 6'2" for instance. The first time you use a movement skill, your trooper will move up to 6 inches with that trooper. The next 4 stats are all linked with your ability to do things, so the closer the number is to 20, or beyond 20, the better. CC is close combat. That's how well your troopers fight up close and how good they are at stabbing stuff. The next is BS, or ballistic skill. This is how well they shoot. pH, or physique, is a measure of their physical prowess and governs abilities like being able to dodge incoming fire and throw grenades. Whip, or willpower, is how clever your trooper is. This is used for things like hacking, discovering hidden troopers, and completing missions. When it comes to phys stats, whip stats, BS stats, you will normally be looking at somewhere between 10 and 15. The higher the stat, the better with those. When you start getting around the sort of BS 13 and 14, you've got some pretty good shooters. Phys being anything above sort of 13 or 14, that says these guys are going to be very good at getting out of the way of being shot. And whip above 14 probably is going to be your specialists, the guys that are really good at doing things like hacking and completing missions. So when you're looking at your stats, that's your kind of band. It's only around 5 points that most profiles fall within. When you learn to read those and to spot them, it will tell you roughly what you're looking at. With the CC stats, there's a much greater range of options in there, with some robots being sort of 6 or 8 points, and some specialist close combat monsters being over 25. Yes, that's right, above 20 on a D20. So when you see those kind of stats, they do impact the game. Having a statistic over 20, which is the maximum you can roll on the D20, of course, those are used in close combat to achieve certain things, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about close combat and close combat skills and things like that. ARM and BTS are protection. ARM is protection against conventional weapons. BTS, or biological technical shield, is protection from hacking, viral weaponry and things like that. For your ARM and BTS values, most line troopers, basic troopers, will have between 0 and maybe 2 for their armor, and BTS, if they're lucky, they'll have 3. When you start getting up towards tags, you'll find the large tag robots will have anything up to ARM 10, which is horrific to play against, and BTS can get up to 9 as well, maybe a little bit more. So for most troopers, especially on the smaller side, you're going to be looking at a couple of points of armor, a couple of points of BTS, so they are quite vulnerable and are quite squishy, and that is why Infinity can be quite a bloody and violent game. Vita is a measure of how many wounds a trooper has, so how much damage they can take. This is replaced by structure, or STR, for robots, tags and vehicles. Vita stats will be between 1 and 3. There are certain units that can get above that, but as a rule, when you start out, between 1 and 3 is where you'll be. So that does mean that even the large robots, the big tags, will only actually have 3 structure points they can lose before they get dropped. Again, this is a violent game. You were warned. S is silhouette, so how big something is. This lets you decide whether something can be seen during the game. Different types of unit have different scales of silhouette, as you can see on screen now. In order to be able to shoot something, you have to be able to see any part of that silhouette. But if it can see any part of your silhouette in return, it may also respond, shoot back, etc. AVA is availability, which lets you know how many of that type of trooper you can have in a army list. Equipment, as the name implies, is the equipment that the trooper carries. This can be anything from force fields to special scopes for their weapons, or even turrets. Special skills covers the abilities which a trooper has. This can be something technical, like the ability to camouflage itself into its surroundings, or buffs for its weapons. It may also include specialist training like martial arts, characteristics such as being especially courageous, or it will tell you if the trooper is a slathering lunatic who wants only to murder. There's quite a range in this particular area. The great thing about equipment and special skills is that they are universal throughout the system. So if you have a special skill on one of your troopers and see it on an enemy trooper, it will do the exact same thing in the exact same way. It's the same with weapons, hacking programs, and a load of other stuff. If it's called the same thing, no matter if it's a completely different faction, then it is the same thing. It makes Infinity a lot easier to learn, and that there are less gotcha moments when an enemy has something completely exotic that you've never seen before. When you take a look at their list, you will, after a relatively short period of time, have a reasonable understanding of what you're looking at. Finally, we have a table of possible loadouts, cost of the trooper, etc. Most troopers will have a range of weapons, skills and abilities they can pick from. The SWC and C figures on the right give you the support weapons cost and points for each loadout. As discussed before, you get 1 SWC for each 50 points of game, and most games are played around 300 points, giving you 6 SWC. All of that information can seem like a lot, and it is, and that's why we recommend running limited profiles for the first few games. Whilst this strips flavour from the game, it also gives you a lot less to think about and to try and figure out in your games. So in your first 2 games, for example, we recommend that you ignore BTS, Silhouette, AVA, equipment and special skills completely. Then you only use the one main weapon and CC weapon on the left-hand side of the profile. Nothing else. Keep it simple. As I said earlier in this video, most skills appear in more than one faction, so learning your army will help you in future games against new factions that you've never seen before. When you've been playing for a while, you'll be able to look at a profile and understand what that unit should do. If it's a gunfighter, an assassin, a specialist, or a close combat beast, you'll get a sense just by reading the stats. But for now, keep it simple and spare your brain cells a little bit of work. And that's it. Some core concepts on how to read an Infinity profile. We hope you found it useful. If so, please like, share and subscribe. Do consider joining the channel as well, as member and Patreon exclusive resources will be available soon. In our next video, we will get you onto your first games, so look for that coming soon. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.